Hey Codester, it's Benjamin Spack here with Codecademy. I'm a developer from the Orlando, Florida area. So in this video, we're going to cover the Excursion project. Let's go ahead and dive in. And a few concepts that we're going to cover in this course. We're going to create a few pages from design mockups that we get from designers. We're going to commit our code locally so that we have a stopping point and a save point. And then we're eventually going to commit our code to GitHub so that you can collaborate with other people on your project. All right, task one. Now that we have the basic understanding of what we need to accomplish, let's go ahead and check out the design mock and the redline mock. The redline mock will probably be the one that will provide the most information to us. Now, this is what I really like to see typically from designers and from clients, really nailing down the font family that you're using, the font weight, the font size, also the color and how they want it aligned. So this is perfect. We already know which font we're using. We know that it's going to be normal and not bold or anything of that nature. We know that it's going to be 50 pixels, it's going to be white, and it's going to be centered. And then we already have the color and font size for this. We have the background color there, so we're solid on that. Same thing with these fonts. And let's see. Okay, and it looks like the one thing that'll probably deviate from the majority of this layout will just be this little Excursion logo over here. Everything else looks like we'll just have to center align. Looks like the font will probably be the same. We'll just have different font sizes. Font weight on this header will probably change a little bit, but other than that, it's fairly consistent. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay, and now that we've completed task one, let's go ahead and move on to task two. We're going to want to open our command line interface, or CLI for short, and then we're going to go ahead and create a directory called Excursion. Okay, and now that I'm in my code editor, which I'm using Visual Studio Code, you can use whichever, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the appropriate working directory. For me, that's going to be desktop, and then we're going to use makedir, which stands for make directory, and we're going to create Excursion. Now I'm just going to go ahead and change directory into Excursion, and I'm hitting the tab key to just autocomplete, and as you can see, now we're in Excursion. Awesome, so we're done with task 2, let's go ahead and move on to task 3. Okay, so now that we have task 2 out of the way, we're going to get started on task 3. We're going to want to make an HTML file, and then we're also going to want to make a couple of subdirectories, such as resources and CSS, and within CSS we're going to want to create style.css and probably get that linked up to index.html. So let's head back over to our code editor. Okay, and in our code editor, we're in the appropriate directory, Excursion, so we're just going to go ahead and make the file index.html. And then we're also going to make that directory of resources. In resources, we're going to make another directory of CSS. And within CSS, we're going to go ahead and make style.css. Awesome. Well, that's it for this task. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. All right, now we have a chance to cross off task 3. Always feels good to cross something off a checklist. All right, now we're moving on to step 4. We're just going to create a GitHub repository in Excursion. And if at any time you're not familiar with some commands that we're looking up, please feel free to pause and look it up on Google. There's always great resources out there. So the command we're going to be using is just git init. Init stands for initialize. As you can see, it does say initialized empty git repository. And that's it. Step 4 is done. Let's move on to step 5. Okay, and with task 4 completed, we're moving on to task 5. We're going to add those HTML and CSS files that we created to our Git staging area. Okay, so back in our code editor, we're going to do git add and dot. Dot is basically just saying this is our current directory. So we're just going to add everything to the Git repository. Next, we want to add a simple message. So we're just going to type in git commit, then we're going to do flag m, and we're just going to type in something like, say, init commit for initial commit. Now, as you can see, files have changed and it is committed. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next task. Okay, so with task 5 out of the way, we're moving on to task 6, where we have to set up a remote GitHub repository. So let's go ahead and switch over to the GitHub repository tab, and I'll show you how to get that set up. Okay, so in our new tab, we're on github.com, and we're going to go to the top right and select New Repository. When the repository pops up, we're just going to paste in the repository name. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a 2. You probably won't have to. I'm just adding the 2 because I already have a repository named Excursion. Then we're going to click Create Repository. And once this screen comes up, what we're going to want to do is push to or add an existing repository as opposed to creating a new one. So for this, we're going to have to copy and paste these lines into our terminal. So let's go ahead and switch over to the terminal. And a nifty little thing that I like to do is just copy and paste these terminal commands into a document that I'm working in. That just saves a little bit of time and headache so you don't have to tab back and forth too much. Alright, so we've added the remote directory. And let's go ahead and cut and paste this one as well. Now it's taking a little bit. It's kind of working, and as you can see, it is pushing to the remote directory. Now let's tap back over to the browser window and see what it looks like. Okay, so back in our browser, just going to do Control-R for refresh. And as you can see, the files that we just worked on are now committed to our GitHub repository. Congrats, give yourself a pat on the back. Let's go ahead and move on to the next task. Alright, so let's go ahead and cross off task 6 and we'll move on to task 7. Here we're going to want to add some boilerplate code, link our CSS file in HTML, and then also add the header and link. Let's get started. Alright, so back in the code editor, we're going to go ahead and just start typing out some of the markup here. So first we want to start off with doc type. And our doc type is going to be HTML. We'll go ahead and close that out. And then we're going to go ahead and put in the starter HTML tag, and we're going to specify the language. Now, this might vary depending upon your region, but I'm going to put EN for English. Alright, and as you can see, the code editor that I'm using auto-completed the last portion of the tag here. If your editor doesn't auto-complete, then just make sure to put in this closing HTML tag as well. Alright, now we're going to put in a couple of meta tags. So for this one, we're going to put in character set. And the character set that we're going to use is UTF-8. That one's pretty standard. And moving right along, we're going to put in another meta tag. And this one is going to be name. And here we're going to type in viewport. And then we're going to put in content. And within content, we're going to put in, width. And then we're going to do equals device width. Alright, then we're going to put in a comma, and we're also going to set the initial scale. And we'll set that to just a scale of 1, and then we'll go ahead and close out that string. Alright, and close out the tag and go to the next line. Now we're going to put in one more meta tag. This one is just going to be HTTP equivalent. And for that, we're going to put in X, UA, compatible. Alright, great. And we're also going to put in content. And with content, we're just going to put in IE Edge, just to make sure that we're compatible with Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge. Great, and we'll go ahead and close out that tab. Now let's go ahead and put in a title tag. And as you can see, again, it auto-completes for me. However, if your IDE or integrated development environment doesn't do that for you, that's quite all right. Just go ahead and type it in manually. All right, and now we have the title. We're just going to use the placeholder of document for the moment. You know what? Actually, let's just go ahead and we're just going to name it Excursion right off the bat. So I'm just going to select that text. There we go. And let's see. Now we're also going to link our style sheet. So we're going to type in the tag, start it off with link, then we're going to do rel equals, and we're going to name that style sheet. Great. And we're going to set the type. The type for this is going to be text/CSS. And we're going to set the href. And on this one, we're going to go, resources, CSS, style, CSS. And then go ahead and close out that link tag, and let's see. From here, we want to also wrap all of this in a head tag. That's one step that we did forget. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut the closing portion of it and paste it in there. And I'm going to go ahead and align this just a little bit more so it looks a little bit nicer and it's more maintainable in the future. I'm going to add in a couple of spaces, and we're going to open up the body tag and close it up as well. Provide a little bit of space so we can put in some additional content there and clean up our code a little bit. And there you go. So we've already finished the initial part where we have the HTML boilerplate and we're linking to the style sheet. So let's go ahead and put in the first header into the markup first. So our header is going to be an H1. I'm not necessarily sure what the heading text is going to be. And then we're also going to put in a paragraph. And within that paragraph, we're going to have the link. And that's just going to be href. For now, we'll just put in a pound symbol. And that's basically just a blank or a default. And again, not sure what the text is, so let's go ahead and swap over to the mockup and we'll see what text we need to put in. Alright, and swapping back over to our Chrome browser and bringing up the tab that has our mockup available, we see that the heading text is going to be discover hidden places in the world around you, and the link text is going to be download Excursion coming soon. So let's go ahead and swap back over to our integrated development environment and we'll type that in. Alright, so back in our IDE, we're going to go ahead and type in discover hidden places in the world around you. And go ahead and correct any typos you may have. Alright, and let's go ahead and put in the link text now. So we want this to say download Excursion, and then we're going to do, let's see, coming soon. And that's going to be capitalized with an exclamation mark as well. Alright, great. So we have our basic markup done for this task. Let's go ahead and move on to the next task. We'll add a little bit more styling and a little bit more markup. Instead of moving on to the next task immediately, let's go ahead and utilize some of our Git skills that we just picked up. So we're going to use git add to add everything that we just added, and then we're going to go to git commit, and we're going to flag M, and we're just going to add a message that says added HTML boilerplate. Alright, and that's committed. Awesome, let's move on. Okay, and we've gone and completed task 7 and 8, where we went and added the boilerplate HTML and linked to our CSS file and then committed. So let's go ahead and move on to task 9. And here we're actually going to go through the entire process, or I should say the majority of the process, of copying over this overall design. So we've already done the top two elements here, but we do want to add in the video. We do also want to add in this additional text, add in this image, and the icon and the other text here. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, and also in the instructions, you're going to see where it says you can download these files, the stock video and the icon and the image. So go ahead and do that. You may have to pause the video here for just a moment and put these in the overall Excursion folder, as you see here. Cool. Finished with that. So now that we have the files downloaded, let's make sure that we're actually putting them in the correct place. Okay, so within the resources directory, we also want to make two subdirectories. One called images and one called videos. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that, and within resources I'm going to select new folder and just paste in images and do the same for videos. Okay, new folder and pasting in videos as well. Cool. Now we can actually store these items in the appropriate directories. So we have the camp image, we have the Excursion video, and the phone image or icon. Cool. So we have that set up, and as you can see, it does turn green here. These changes haven't been committed to Git yet, so let's go ahead and let's do that now. Remember, we're just doing git add, and then we're doing git commit, flag M, and let's say added media resources. Great. And you can see that that's been created and added, and everything has turned from green to this nice whitish gray. Okay, so there's a quick disclaimer here. It's essentially saying anytime we put in an image element, we're going to want to make sure to wrap that in a paragraph element. Also, the cell phone icon is white, and we're definitely going to want to make sure that we have the black background established so that the white image actually shows up in contrast against it. So let's go ahead and move back over to the mockup, and we'll start building out the HTML and the CSS styling. Okay, and back over in our design mockup, we see this header that we added and the link. However, we didn't do any sort of styling for it. We didn't set the font family, the font weight, or the size. So, in order to get set up, let's go ahead and bring up our HTML page, and we'll take a look at what we presently do have. Okay, so I just opened up index.html in my Chrome browser, and as you can see, without the styling, we do have the markup and we do have the text here, but unfortunately it isn't styled the way we want it. We do want to have that nice black background. We want this text in white and add those other characteristics such as having it centered and those sorts of things. So let's go ahead and dive into the styling, and we'll get it looking like it should. Alright, so we're back in our code editor and we're in the style.css file. I'm just going to go ahead and remove that extra line that we have there. And what we're going to want to do is apply a overall style to the body of our document. So a good way to think about body is basically everything that's in between this body markup tag right here. That's where your styling is going to be applied. So essentially everything within these body tags is going to be styled, and everything that we do pertaining to this is going to be styled right here. So we're going back over to style.css, and the first thing we're going to want to do is change that background color. So as you can see, we do have background-color, and on this one we're going to go ahead and set this to black, and we can just do this using 000, and 000 is just a shortcut for 6 zeros. So we have the background color set. Now what we also want to do is center align the majority of the text. So we're going to type in text align, and then we're going to go center. And we're also going to want to set the appropriate font for this as well. So let's go ahead and do a quick save, and then I'm going to switch back over to our design mockup. Okay, so back in our design mockup, we can take a look at the different fonts here, and it looks like we have a similar font family to all of the text that's used on this. As you can see, it's Veranda in the header, and the link here doesn't specify, so we'll assume it's the same. Same thing with the subheader and this header as well. And this isn't specified, and neither is this, so we're going to assume that's all the same font. So let's go ahead and apply that font family to the overall body, since it'll be the uniform font for the overall design. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put in font family, and we're just going to go ahead and start typing the font family that we want. In this case, it's Veranda, and it's always a wise idea to have a couple of fallback fonts just in case. So let's go ahead and save that, and we'll preview this in the browser and see how it looks. Alright, so we're back in the Chrome browser, and I'm just going to do a quick refresh. Alright, now, as you can see, we do have a couple of elements showing up. The link is actually showing up now. Our text is center aligned, and it looks like we do have the proper font family. However, it doesn't look like we have the appropriate color applied to this text here. And since we have two different sets of text colors, one for the link and one for the title, we're probably not going to want to do that in the overall body styling. So let's go ahead and switch back over to our code editor. We'll commit the changes that we do have, and then we'll get started on styling the header. Back in our code editor, and we're just going to jump down into our terminal, and within the terminal we're just going to do the same old add and git commit. Flag M, and for our message we're just going to put, let's see, added body style. Great, and that's committed. So let's go ahead and go back over to our design mockup, and we'll get started on that header. Alright, so back in our design mockup, we do see that we want to change the font weight to normal. We also want to change the font size to 50, and we want to change the font color to white for this overall heading. Back in our code editor, we're going to want to go ahead and style that main header. The way that I typically like to name classes is first by the component and then how we're going to modify the component. In this instance, we're just going to start off with the class name header, and then I'm going to just go ahead and do a double dash here to separate that it's basically the header, but this is what we're going to alter on the header. And we're just going to go ahead and call this main. Put in our curly braces, and let's see, what else do we have to do? We already have the text aligned, we already have the font set, but that's right, we have to go ahead and set the font weight. Okay, and our font weight for this is just going to be normal. And then we also want to set the font size, 50 pixels. And we're also going to want to change the color to white. So we'll just do #FFF and we'll go ahead and save. One more thing before we commit. Let's go ahead and copy the style name, and we're going to go over to our HTML file. And within this header, we're going to make sure that we add in the class property. It's basically going to say, hey, we're looking in this CSS file, and within the CSS file, we're looking for this specific class. Let's go ahead and make sure that both of these are saved. Then we're going to go ahead and commit this again. Added header, main, style. Awesome, changes are committed. So let's go ahead and go back over to our browser and see if these changes took place properly. Alright, so back in our browser we're going to do a quick refresh. And now, as you can see, the header does show up properly. It's the correct color, it's centered, it does have a nice large font weight and size. So let's go ahead and move on to the next part of styling this link. Alright, and I've switched back over to our design mockup. Because we're working on a new component, we definitely want to double check the design mockup just to make sure that we're getting everything just the way the designer wants it. So the font family hasn't changed, nor has the font weight. But we are changing the font size, and we're also going to change the color of this link. So let's go ahead and go back over to our code editor, and we'll make it the appropriate color and the appropriate size. Alright, so we're back in our code editor. We're going to go ahead and make another class, and again, I'm just going to name the component and then how we're modifying the component. So I'm going to name it as link and then CTA, which is short for call to action. Alright, and then we're also going to change the font size from what it was, or I should say what we were working with, to what this one should be. So in this case, it's 16. And I'm just copying and pasting these attributes to save us a little bit of time. And we're going to go ahead and change this hexadecimal value to aquamarine. And cool, let's go ahead and give that a save. Now, bear in mind, we already have the font family and the text center, or I should say text alignment, set as center within the overall body. So these will already be applied. So let's go ahead and pop into index.html and input this class. Alright, and we'll just go ahead and start off our class property, and I just pasted in link --CTA. Let's hit save, and let's go through the commit process again. Now, in my terminal, I just hit the up arrow so that I can use up our old commands here. Alright, and I just hit enter there, and this time we're just going to delete that, paste in link CTA, hit enter, and we're good to go. Alright, so let's head back to the browser and see if those changes have taken effect. Alright, and we're back in the browser, just going to do a quick refresh. And as you can see, now we have the nice aquamarine color, and the font size is where we want it. Move on to the next step. We're just going to check the design mockup, and I believe the next step is just going to be adding in that video. Alright, and double checking our design mockup, we do see the video player here, and one thing to note about the video player is it doesn't have any controls displayed. So we'll definitely have to make sure that we're doing that appropriately in our code editor. So swapping back over to our code editor, we're going to go ahead and add the video tag. Now, again, as I mentioned, we don't want to use or display controls, so we're not going to type in controls within this tag. However, we do want autoplay. This is going to start the play of the video for us, and we're also going to want it to be in a loop so that it's consistently playing this video over and over again. And we're going to go ahead and put in the source as well, so we know exactly which video file to use. Okay, and we have the source attribute now. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we're going into Resources, Videos, and Excursion. Alright, great. And we're also going to want to specify the type of the video. Alright, and let's go ahead and close that out. Just head down to the terminal. Alright, and let's go ahead and commit those changes before we check in the browser. So we're just going to hit up arrow a couple of times until we get our git add, and then we're also going to change the commit message to added video. Alright, changes are committed. Let's go back to the browser. And back in our browser, we're just going to do the refresh again. And as you can see, as soon as we refresh, the video player does show up and the video does start playing. Also, there's the absence of the controls, which is exactly what we wanted. And we're going to start adding in the additional subheaders and the other image. Let's go ahead and double check the design mockup just to see what we're adding. Okay, so back in the design mockup, we have the video added, and below this we have a separate header. So it looks like this header is actually a lighter font weight, even though the font family is the same, and the font size is going to be a little bit different. So that's a pretty good indication that we're going to have to do a different heading style for this. Also below you can see that we have the subheader, and this also has a different color and font size. So let's go back over to the code editor and we'll figure out how we want to structure these. Alright, so back in the code editor, we're going to go ahead and just give ourselves a little bit of space here. And initially, our largest header was set as an H1. And the next header that we're using is going to be slightly smaller. So let's go ahead and set something like H2. And we're also going to need our subheader below that. And the subheader is about half the size of the header above it, so we're probably going to set that as H4. Now let's go ahead and pull in the text, and then we'll do the styling. Okay, so after double checking the design mockup, the text that we're going to add is your personal travel guide. Alright, and there's no punctuation at the end. Then we're going to go ahead and add in the submenu as well. Alright, and I'm going to just go ahead and correct any spelling mistakes that I've made. Now, bear in mind, we are using a punctuation mark on this subheader. Alright, great. So now that we have the overall structure and content, what we want to do is change up the styling on it. So let's go ahead and organize this CSS file just a little bit more, as we do have a link here and we have a heading, but we're also going to make another heading and a subheading. So one way that I like to organize this is just by putting in a comment. And you can make a comment in CSS just like this. And I'm just going to put this in all capitals so it's nice to see. I'm just going to title that headings. Also going to make a copy of that and paste it in here and change that from headings to links. And we'll save. Alright, great. Now let's go ahead and style these headings and then we'll do a couple of commits. Following the case that we had before where we had header main, let's do header secondary. Alright, great. Based upon the design mock, the things that we had viewed that weren't going to change here are the font family and the centering. The color is not going to change either. However, since we're not setting color globally, we're definitely going to have to copy that over. Alright, and another thing that did change on here was the font weight. So we'll copy that over. And according to the design specifications, our font weight is going to be 300 as opposed to normal. And again, we noted that the font size was going to be different on this one. So we're going to change that from 50 to 42. All right, great. So we have our class of header secondary. Let's go ahead and apply that to our HTML before we forget. We're just going to put in class, paste in header secondary, save, and we're off to the races. And since we're already here, let's also put in class, and we'll leave that blank for a moment as we go and style the subheader. And we're just going to copy this and put a dot in front of that just to make sure it's a class. And instead of naming it header secondary, we're just going to call it subheader. And I'm going to go ahead and put a nice dash in there just to clean that up a little bit. And let's go ahead and switch back over to the design mock really fast, just so we can verify that we did this one correctly and that we're getting the content correct for this. Alright, so back in the design mock, we can see that for our secondary header, we did set the font weight correct, we did set the font size correct, and we have to go ahead and just double check this for the subheader. Looks like we want the font size to be 21, and this time we want the font to be gray. So let's go back to our code editor and we'll implement these changes in our styling. Great, so back in our code editor, we're going to go ahead and implement these font sizes. And we're also going to want to change the font color. We're changing the font size to 21, and the color is going to be gray. So again, we're going to remove that hash, and we're just going to stick with the plain gray. That should be good. Let's go ahead and copy over the class that we just created. And we're going to put that into the blank space that we had in the HTML document and hit save. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and commit these changes. So this time we're going to add the message, let's see, created secondary and subheaders. All right, and commit is made. Let's go ahead back over to the browser and just sample these changes. And back in our browser, we're just hitting refresh. Now, as you can see, we do have our header, our call to action, the video, and the work that we just did with our secondary header and the subheader. Well, we're making great progress. Let's go ahead and check the design mock again, and we'll see what else we have to add. All right, so back in the design mock, looks like we're on the home stretch. We have to add in a couple of more components. So we're going to put in this image, and let's go ahead and focus on the icon as well. So let's head back over to Code Editor, double check the notes that we had copied over from the task, and we'll implement these images. So we're back in our Code Editor, and let's see. So here's an important note. We definitely want to wrap our images in paragraph elements. And that's the last little bit of the task, so I'm just going to go ahead and close that. We no longer need that. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of paragraphs for us because we are adding in a couple of images. Then we're going to want to go ahead and create our image tag. Now, here's a nifty little thing in a lot of code editors. Sometimes there's a nice little hotkey, so you don't have to do a lot of double duty in typing. So I definitely recommend checking if your code editor has this feature. So we're just going to type in image, source, and let's see, the source for both of these is going to be different, so we definitely don't want to type in the same thing. All right, so the first one is going to be resources. This one is going to be an image, and this time we're going to use camp. Then let's go ahead and copy this just to save ourselves a little bit of time. We'll paste this in here and just remove the part that is different. And then we can put in phone, and we're good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and hit save. And because we already did style the body class and set everything to center that way, we may have these centered just because they're wrapped in a paragraph tag, but let's go ahead and double check our hunch in the browser. All right, back in the browser, doing a refresh. Oh no, our images aren't showing up. Let's go ahead and troubleshoot. Okay, so we're back in our code editor and we're troubleshooting what the issue was. Now, I know I threw a little bit of a curveball at you, but this is something I want you to get pretty familiar with. This process is referred to as debugging. As you can see here in this source, we don't have a slash prior to resources. However, in these sources down here, we do. So let's go ahead and, for continuity's sake, make these the same. Let's save our change, go back to the browser, preview it, and we'll see if that's fixed the bug for us. So we're back in our browser, and we see this buggy little section here where these images aren't showing up properly for us. But let's do a refresh. And hey, look at that. The changes that we just made resolved our bugs. The images do show up the way that we want. So let's go back to the design mockup and see what else we have to add. So we're back in our design mockup, and we can pretty much see the finish line at this point. Because look at this. The secondary header that we have down here doesn't have any additional directions or instructions. So we're going to go ahead and assume that the designer wants us to just repeat pre-existing elements. So we already have this set up with the secondary header, and we already have this link set up with call to action. So let's go ahead and go over to our code editor. We're going to go ahead and save these changes in Git, and then we'll just implement this new markup and go ahead and style these. Back in our code editor, we're going to go ahead and add in those additional components. And as we saw, these were already created for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this markup that we already have, because the size of it isn't going to change, and nor is the class. The only thing that we're going to change on this is the content. So here we're just going to type in exactly what's in the design mockup, which is coming soon for iPhone and Android. Alright, cool. Now we're also going to want to put in a link, and we did that earlier as well. So let's go ahead and copy that. We'll paste it in. Again, the structure of the markup's not going to change, the class isn't going to change, and actually, looking at our design mockup, we're not even going to change that either. The CTA is going to be the same. Let's go ahead and hit save, and we don't have to go back to style.css because we already have those stylings. So let's go ahead and commit these changes as well. First we're going to add, and then of course, we're going to add our commit message. Footer text. Alright, great. So changes are committed. Let's go ahead and go back to the instructions really fast just to see if there's anything else we may be missing. Alright, so we're making solid progress. After reading through, it looks like we've already completed step 9. And since we're on top of things and we've been committing our entire journey and committing in opportune moments, we can go ahead and check off step 10 as well. Okay, and in step 11, it looks like there's a little bit of a curveball. What we want to do is push these to a GitHub repository, and within GitHub, we're going to want to set up GitHub pages so that it's automatically displayed for us. Then, after we have it set up to GitHub, we're going to want to go ahead and complete the footer and complete any sort of styling. So let's go ahead and get started on step 11. And back in our code editor, since we already did the git commit, all we have to do is git push, and all of our changes are now pushed up to the cloud. Let's go back to our browser and just manually verify that these changes have shown up. Now, since we are adding images and we're also adding the video, it will take a little bit to update and upload. Now, as you can see, it's resolving and it's complete. Alright, back to the browser. We're in the browser looking at our repository. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. Awesome. And now you can see that we have the resources directory. We also have these different timestamps here, and we have these different commit messages that we've been adding throughout the process. So let's go back to the directions. We'll go ahead and check off this step, and we'll move on to the next one. And back to the instructions, we're going to go ahead and check off point 11. And I'm going to go ahead and proceed to step 12. We'll go ahead and finish up the remainder of this, which is just the footer here. Then we're going to go ahead and push our changes to the GitHub repository. And I would recommend setting up GitHub pages just so you can view our overall work live on GitHub pages. And we're back in our code editor. As we just saw on the directions page there, we did see that our text was right aligned, and it looks like the text color was also gray. So let's go ahead and copy this paragraph here. And we're probably not going to need this link section. So let's go ahead and remove that and remove the markup tag. Now we're going to want to go ahead and change the text content to Excursion. And we're also going to want to put in a copyright symbol. All right. And I'm just pasting this in from a Googled link. You can definitely find this on Google if you don't know how to create it. All right, so we have the markup that we need now. However, we don't have a class that's applied to this. So let's go ahead and over to Style CSS and we'll set that up. But first, let's go ahead and put in a placeholder of class and we'll leave that nice and blank. Now we'll head over to style.css and let's see. It's not a link. It's not necessarily anything to do with a heading. So tell you what, let's go ahead and make another section and we'll call this footer. All right, great. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this overall style that we have here just to save us a little bit of time. We definitely don't want this to be aquamarine, however. So we're just going to go ahead and copy the property of gray and replace aquamarine with gray. All right, let's double check the design spec just to verify what the font size is. Okay, so back in the design spec, we can see that this excursion text here hasn't provided a font size, so we're going to assume that it's the same font size as this subheading here, which is 21 pixels. All right, back to the code editor. And in the code editor, we're going to change this to 21 pixels as we just saw. Now, we also want to align this text to the right. So let's go ahead and type in text align, right, let's call it copyright. Then we'll go ahead and copy our class, give a save to the style, head back over to our markup, and paste that directly into class. All right, great. Let's give that a save as well. And that should pretty much complete where we're at. So let's go ahead and make sure that we're doing an add. And let's add a nice little commit message of final push. And we're also going to do git push so that this gets synced with GitHub. Awesome. Great. Now let's go back over to the browser. We're just going to preview it one last time. Back in the browser, we're just going to preview our hard work. Going to go ahead and refresh this. And now as we see, the subheader here is added. We have the call to action text, and we even have our right aligned text that we just added in. So this looks quite similar to the design spec, though I would highly recommend whenever you're working with a designer to double check it yourself and then triple check the work yourself. Tag up with someone else that you respect just to get an outside opinion to make sure that your design and your code match well. So let's go back to the instructions and we'll go ahead and tick a couple of boxes. We have completed the footer. Awesome. I'm not sure about you, but I'm pretty satisfied with our end product. It does look very similar to the example here and the design mockup. So let's go ahead and just tick that box as well. And we've already pushed our changes, so we're good to go. Well, hopefully this has been helpful for you. My name is Benjamin Spack. I'm with Codecademy, and I'll see you in a future video.